There is a moment that happens almost invisibly, usually at a checkout counter or during a late-night online purchase, where the brain quietly shifts its perception of money, and what once felt like spending suddenly feels like something else entirely, something softer, less real, almost like the rules have changed without permission. The number is still there, the price is still visible, but the emotional weight attached to it has been reduced, and in that subtle shift lies one of the most powerful behavioral distortions in modern finance. Cash has friction. When you hand over physical money, your brain registers loss in a direct and immediate way, activating discomfort that makes you pause, reconsider, and sometimes walk away. This response is deeply tied to how humans evolved to manage scarce resources, where every exchange required conscious awareness. But when payment methods became abstract, first through cards and later through digital systems, that friction began to disappear, and with it, the psychological resistance that once protected spending behavior. A credit card does not feel like money in the same way cash does, and this is not a coincidence or a personal weakness, but rather a predictable outcome explained by behavioral economics. The concept, often referred to as decoupling, describes how the act of paying becomes separated from the act of consuming, which reduces the immediate emotional impact of a purchase. When you swipe a card, there is no tangible loss in that moment, no physical separation from something you can see or touch, and as a result, the brain processes the transaction with far less intensity. This effect becomes even stronger when repayment is delayed. With credit systems, the actual financial consequence is pushed into the future, which creates a temporal gap between action and consequence. The brain naturally discounts future pain, a tendency known as temporal discounting, meaning that a cost tomorrow feels less significant than a cost today, even if the amount is identical. This is why spending with credit often feels easier, not because the cost is lower, but because the brain perceives it as less immediate. If we translate this into simple math, the distortion becomes clearer. Imagine two scenarios where a person spends $500. In the first, they pay in cash, immediately reducing their available resources by that amount. In the second, they use a credit card, deferring the payment by 30 days. Financially, the outcome may appear similar on the surface, but behaviorally, they are not equivalent. The delayed payment reduces the perceived cost at the moment of purchase, which increases the likelihood of additional spending during that same period. Now, extend this across multiple transactions. If each purchase carries a slightly reduced psychological cost, the total spending over time begins to expand, not through a single large decision, but through smaller, less resisted ones. This is where the system quietly compounds. The difference is not just in how money is spent, but in how often the decision to spend is approved by the brain. There is also an identity component hidden beneath this mechanism. When spending feels less painful, it becomes easier to align purchases with aspirational versions of oneself, whether that means choosing higher-priced items, more frequent upgrades, or experiences that signal a certain lifestyle. The credit system does not just enable transactions, it subtly reshapes the boundary between current reality and desired identity, allowing people to act as if they have already reached a financial position they have not yet fully secured. Historically, this shift did not happen overnight. The expansion of consumer credit in the late 20th century marked a turning point in how economies functioned, gradually normalizing the idea that consumption could precede payment. Over time, this created a system where growth became partially dependent on this behavioral distortion, where easier spending supported broader economic activity, even as it increased individual financial strain in less visible ways. None of this suggests that credit itself is inherently harmful, but it does highlight how the structure of a payment system can influence behavior at a psychological level. When the brain interprets a transaction as less real, it does not apply the same level of scrutiny, and this difference, repeated across hundreds of decisions, can meaningfully alter financial outcomes over time.
The important shift, then, is not in avoiding specific tools, but in recognizing how they change perception. When you understand that the ease of spending is partly an engineered experience, it becomes possible to reintroduce intentional friction, whether by pausing before purchases, tracking spending more actively, or mentally linking each transaction back to the future cost it represents. In the end, the question is not whether a credit card is being used, but whether the mind is fully registering the trade that is taking place, because money does not become less real simply because the moment of payment has been delayed, and the system only works as long as that illusion remains unnoticed.